Picture this. It is 2 a.m. in Kenya. The whole country is asleep. Your average Nairobi resident is either snoring, scrolling TikTok, or doing both simultaneously. Meanwhile, in a two-bedroom apartment in Tatu City, not a server farm, not a government intelligence facility, not the headquarters of some shadowy cybercrime syndicate, a 26-year-old man who dropped out of university in his second year is sitting in front of multiple screens operating what investigators would later describe as a fully equipped personal cyber laboratory. He has a Starlink router, he has a MacBook M2, he has an HP Omen, he has an iPhone 16 Pro, he has a Samsung S22, he has a safe, he has a money counting machine, and he has a plan. By 2:10 a.m., in exactly 6 minutes, he would execute 38 separate transactions, move 11.4 million Kenyan shillings through the country's financial pipeline, erase every trace of the operation from the servers, and go to bed. 6 minutes, 11.4 million shillings, while you were sleeping. That man's name is Seth Mwabe Okwanyo, and today on Africa Daily, we are going to use his story to have a conversation that your bank, your company, and frankly, your IT department have been avoiding. Because Seth Mwabe is not just a crime story, Seth Mwabe is a cybersecurity tutorial. And whether you are running a multinational company, a Safaricom integrated betting firm, or a corner shop M-Pesa till, you're going to want to take notes. This is Africa Daily. Let's get into it. Who is Seth Mwabe, and why should you care? Let me introduce you properly to the man at the center of this story, because the way the media covered his arrest, you would think they caught some grizzled 40-year-old crime boss hiding behind 17 VPNs in a bunker somewhere. What the DCI actually found when they broke down the door of his Tatu City apartment was a 26-year-old young man who, by every indicator, was exactly what he said he was, a cybersecurity enthusiast. His LinkedIn profile described him as an information security enthusiast driven by passion. He had apparently founded a cybersecurity training community while still a student at Meru University, before he dropped out in his second year. Between 2018 and 2020, he completed what he described as practical placements at multiple companies. He ran a personal blog in 2018, and the content of that blog is genuinely fascinating. He wrote detailed posts about how office printers could be hijacked using default passwords, not because he was planning to steal anything, because that is what cybersecurity people do. They find the vulnerabilities and document them. In 2019, he won 50,000 shillings in a cybersecurity competition run by a major Kenyan bank. A bank paid him to find weaknesses, because that is also what cybersecurity people do. They get paid to find the gaps before the bad guys do. Now, here is the uncomfortable question that I want to sit with before we get to the criminal allegations. What happened between 2019, when a bank was paying him prizes for his skills, and July 2025, when those same skills allegedly got pointed at a betting firm's payment system? The answer, when you look at it honestly, is not complicated, it is not surprising, and it is not unique to Seth. Kenya produced a genuinely talented, self-taught cybersecurity professional, and the formal economy had no structured, accessible pathway to absorb that talent into legitimate work. So the talent found another pathway. That is not an excuse for what allegedly happened. It is a diagnosis. And if Kenya does not treat the diagnosis, there are many more Seths sitting in apartments right now running on skill and ambition and absolutely no institutional support, waiting to make the same calculation. Now, let me take you through what allegedly happened on the night of July 16, 2025. I am going to explain this in plain language because the cybersecurity lesson here is too important to bury in technical jargon. There were 3 systems involved in processing payments at the betting company, which investigators linked to AfriSend Money Transfer Limited. Think of these 3 systems as 3 guards standing in a line. The first guard checks whether a transaction instruction is legitimate. The second guard acts as a bridge, moving money rapidly between different financial institutions. This was Pesalink, Kenya's national real-time settlement system. The third guard was the bank itself holding the actual money. Seth's alleged genius, and I use that word deliberately because what he reportedly did was technically sophisticated, was that he did not attack the bank directly. He did not try to crack Pesalink. He went in through the first guard, the internal system, and he got in through the oldest vulnerability in cybersecurity: a human being. Specifically, an administrator at the company, someone with high-level access permissions to the system. Seth allegedly sent this administrator what looked like a routine security alert email, the kind of email that appears completely normal, the kind of email that millions of people click on every single day without thinking. The administrator clicked it. That single click installed a malicious Java application silently on the administrator's machine. Because the administrator had high-level permissions, the malware inherited those permissions. And because it had those permissions, it walked straight from the administrator's laptop into the main company server, like a visitor who borrows your key card and goes anywhere they want. This method has a name. It is called a spear phishing attack, combined with privilege escalation. And it works repeatedly in organizations across the world, including organizations that absolutely should know better, because it does not attack technology, it attacks psychology. Nobody clicks a suspicious link on purpose. They click it because it looked legitimate. Once the malware was inside the system, Seth didn't even need to be there physically. He allegedly controlled the whole operation through a Telegram bot, a messaging app, the same one you use to send memes to your group chat. He used it as a remote control to instruct the malware what to do, where to look, and when to move the money. At 2:04 a.m., he pressed go. The code woke up and began impersonating a senior administrator. It reached into the payment pipeline, the junction between the company's internal system, Pesalink, and Diamond Trust Bank, and began issuing transaction commands. 38 transactions, 11.4 million shillings, 6 minutes. And then, this is the part that is genuinely impressive from a technical standpoint, even as it is deeply illegal. The code erased itself from the logs. In real time, as the money moved, the server's memory of the transactions was being deleted. To every internal dashboard, to every IT monitor in the company, nothing was happening. By 2:10 a.m., it was over. The money had moved. The evidence inside the company system had vanished, and Seth, apparently, went to sleep. The cybersecurity lessons your company is ignoring. Let me pause the Seth story for a moment and talk directly to every business owner, IT manager, finance director, and decision maker watching Africa Daily. Because everything that allegedly happened in that 6-minute window was preventable. Not difficult to prevent, not expensive to prevent. Preventable with basic, genuinely basic, cybersecurity hygiene. Lesson 1. The email that started everything. The administrator clicked a link in an email. That is where the entire operation began. One click. Your company's entire digital security is only as strong as the judgment of the most tired, most distracted, most trusting employee you have. And humans are reliably tired, distracted, and trusting. The solution is not to find perfect employees. The solution is multi-factor authentication, email filtering systems that flag spoofed sender addresses, and a culture where employees are actively trained to verify before they click, not once in an induction program 3 years ago, regularly, with simulated phishing tests, because the threat evolves, and so must the defense. Lesson 2. The permissions problem. Once the administrator's machine was compromised, the malware walked straight into the main server because the administrator had permissions to be there. This is called the principle of least privilege in cybersecurity, and it is one of the most important concepts that most African businesses completely ignore. The principle is simple. Every user, every account, every system should only have access to exactly what it needs to do its specific job, nothing more. An administrator who processes certain types of transactions does not need access to the entire server. The delivery driver does not need the keys to the whole building. You give people access to their room, not the master key. Had that principle been in place, even a compromised administrator account would have had limited reach. The malware would have been contained to a smaller area of the system. Lesson 3. Real-time log monitoring. Seth's code erased the logs inside the company's system, and for weeks nobody noticed, because nobody was monitoring the logs in real time. The theft was only discovered when the bank's external reconciliation statement did not match the company's internal records. The bank's numbers were the tripwire that saved the investigation. The company's own systems had been blinded. Modern cybersecurity requires what is called a SIEM, a Security Information and Event Management System. It monitors your logs in real time and raises an alert the moment something unusual happens, like 38 transactions executing in 6 minutes at 2 a.m. A properly configured SIEM would have screamed. Instead, the silence was deafening. Lesson 4. The reconciliation saved everything. Now here is the lesson that is actually slightly funny in a dark way. After all that technical sophistication, the malware, the real-time log erasure, the Telegram bot remote control, Seth's entire operation was ultimately unraveled by the most old-fashioned financial tool in existence, a bank statement. The bank sent its monthly settlement report. The numbers did not match, and the investigation began. You can erase every digital log on the company's servers. You cannot erase the record of where the money actually went. Pasalink still had records. Diamond Trust Bank still had records. The 38 destination accounts still had records. And those records formed the trail that led investigators from a high-speed internet node in Tatu City all the way to a specific apartment and a specific man. The lesson for financial businesses everywhere: the reconciliation process is not a formality. It is your last line of defense. If it is happening monthly, consider making it weekly. If it is weekly, consider daily. Because in the 6 weeks between the theft and the discovery, a lot of money can move a long way. The arrest and why the scene was genuinely cinematic. Now let me take you to August 30th, 2025, because the arrest itself deserves a moment. The DCI Banking Fraud Unit had been tracking the digital trail for weeks. They had the IP addresses, they had the pattern, they had the Starlink kit purchase records, they had a name and an address, and they waited, specifically until they were confident he was inside the apartment, surrounded by the very equipment that had been used in the operation. When they knocked, Seth apparently did not open the door immediately, which is understandable. You have a full cyber laboratory in your living room and the DCI is at the door at an uncomfortable hour. You take a moment. The moment passed, the door did not open. They broke it down. Inside, they found a safe, a money-counting machine, multiple high-end computers, servers, routers, customized software tools, an iPhone 16 Pro, a Samsung S22, an MacBook M2, an HP Omen laptop, and a Starlink router. Let me be clear about what this equipment list tells you. This was not a desperate man running a scam from a borrowed phone. This was a professional setup. Whatever Seth was doing, legitimate consulting, illegal operations, or some blurred combination of the two, he was doing it seriously, with proper tools, with clear intent and investment. When confronted by detectives, he did not deny being in the cybersecurity space. He confirmed it. He told them he had been in the game since 2017. He described himself as an independent consultant who got contracted by different entities. And here is the part that I find genuinely thought-provoking. He was not entirely wrong about who he was. He had won competitions. He had consulted. He had documented vulnerabilities on his blog since 2018. The skills were real. The professional identity was real. The line between legitimate penetration testing and what he is accused of doing, that line, in his mind, may have been blurrier than the law allows. That does not make the alleged theft acceptable, but it makes the story more interesting than young criminal steals millions. It is actually the story of a real professional who, according to prosecutors, took his legitimate toolkit and pointed it in the wrong direction. The court drama, which had more plot twists than a telenovela. Now we get to the legal journey, and I want you to appreciate just how much happened between August 2025 and today, because it is genuinely extraordinary. Seth was arrested on August 30th. On September 1st, he was before the court. The prosecution asked to detain him for 20 days to complete investigations. The magistrate looked at the application, considered the grounds, and essentially told the prosecution, "This application does not meet the threshold. The man's rights are more important than your incomplete paperwork." Seth walked out on a bond of 1 million shillings with the alternative of cash bail at 500,000. Conditions: report to the DCI weekly on Tuesday mornings at 10. Provide 3 contact persons and do not interfere with the investigation in any way. The magistrate added a personal note, and I genuinely appreciate this moment of judicial candor. The court observed that it had seen social media posts in which Seth appeared to be taunting the investigators. Posts suggesting that if they pushed him too hard, there was more to come. The magistrate said the posts were noted, but confirmed they had not influenced the ruling, because a judge's job is to apply the law, not respond to social media dares. That is a magistrate with composure, because if someone who was apparently sitting in a holding cell was already posting things on social media that sounded like threats to the financial system, most of us would have some feelings about that. The social media reaction from Kenyans was, as it always is on this topic, magnificently divided. One camp was firmly in the arrest and prosecute corner. Another camp was equally firmly in the "this is a talent that should be employed by the government" corner. People were comparing Seth to Bill Gates. People were comparing Seth to a dangerous criminal. Both camps were making their arguments with extraordinary confidence about a situation most of them knew from 3 Twitter threads. But here is where the story took a genuinely unexpected turn. On February 10, 2026, Seth appeared in court on a miscellaneous application. The court closed the application, finding no case to answer on that specific matter. The court also ordered that the seized equipment be returned to him. His MacBook M2, his iPhone 16 Pro, his Starlink router, his HP Omen, all of it handed back. Seth stepped outside the courthouse, and detectives who had been standing there waiting with a second, freshly prepared arrest warrant arrested him again immediately. The man walked out of court having just won a legal argument, got his laptops back, took approximately 4 steps of freedom, and was rearrested before he reached the car park. That is not a plot twist. That is 3 plot twists happening simultaneously. By February 12, 2026, Seth Mwabe Okwanyo was formally charged. 20 counts. Unauthorized access to a computer system, computer fraud, 18 counts of money laundering. He denied all charges before Senior Resident Magistrate Irene Thamana. He was granted cash bail of 500,000 shillings. The case was set for hearing at a later date, with a mention scheduled for March 3, 2026. As of right now, in March 2026, Seth Mwabe is on bail, facing 20 criminal counts and waiting for his day in proper court. The investigation is ongoing. The forensic examination of his devices continues. Telegram and Starlink, both operating outside Kenyan jurisdiction, have been served with court orders requesting user information. Some banks have cooperated with data requests, others have not. The case is very much alive. The debate Kenya needs to have. Now, let me give you the analysis that the news coverage mostly missed, because the Seth Mwabe story is not actually about one man and one heist. It is about a structural problem and how Africa is handling the cybersecurity talent pipeline. And getting this wrong has consequences that go far beyond one court case. Kenya's digital economy is genuinely impressive. M-Pesa is one of the most innovative mobile money systems in the world. Pesa Link represents sophisticated national financial infrastructure. The betting industry has driven massive fintech development. The tech ecosystem in Nairobi, Silicon Savannah as it is called, is real. But here is the tension. That sophisticated digital economy requires sophisticated digital defenders. It needs people who understand how the systems work, how they can be broken, and how to fix them before someone with worse intentions finds the gap first. Those people exist in Kenya. Seth Mwabe is one of them, trained not by a university, which he left in his second year, but by years of self-directed study, competition wins, blog writing, and practical experimentation. He was recognized by a major Kenyan bank in 2019 with a 50,000 shilling prize. He was a known quantity in the cybersecurity community before most people had ever heard his name. And yet, there is no clear, well-funded, well-organized national program to identify people like Seth and channel their skills into legitimate, well-paid, institutionally supported work. There is no Kenyan equivalent of the kind of national cyber talent pipelines that countries like Israel, Estonia, or Singapore have built specifically because they understand that their digital security depends on having the most skilled people on the right side of the line. Instead, what Kenya has is find the talent after it allegedly commits a crime, arrest it, and put it through a court process that takes years while the forensic evidence sits on hard drives waiting to be analyzed. That is not a security strategy. That is an ambulance at the bottom of a cliff. The voices calling for Seth's skills to be harnessed rather than punished are not wrong in their instinct, even if the specific argument ignores the seriousness of the allegations. The instinct is right. Kenya needs its best technical minds working for the country, not against it. The problem is that the institutional infrastructure to make that happen, the funded internship pipelines, the government cybersecurity agencies with proper recruitment budgets, the corporate partnerships with talent development programs, does not exist at the scale the problem requires. Seth Mwabe did not create this gap. He fell through it. Your practical cybersecurity checklist. Let me bring this home with something useful, because this episode is not just about one man's story. It is about every organization in Africa that has a digital system, a payment gateway, or an internet connection and thinks cybersecurity is something they will sort out later. There is no later. Later is when Seth, or someone far less interesting and far more malicious, is already inside your system, erasing your logs at 2 a.m. Here is your Africa Daily Cybersecurity Checklist. Write this down, send it to your IT person, send it to your boss, send it to yourself. Number 1. Assume your employees will be targeted, not because they are bad people, because they are human. Implement multi-factor authentication everywhere. Run phishing simulation exercises regularly. Make it normal and safe for employees to report suspicious emails without fear of embarrassment. The administrator who clicked that link might have saved the whole company if there had been a clear, shame-free reporting culture. Number 2. Apply the principle of least privilege. Audit who has access to what right now, today, not next quarter. Every user account should have only the permissions needed for their specific job. The more you limit access, the less damage a compromised account can do. Number 3. Monitor your logs in real time. If your organization has a significant digital financial operation and you are not running continuous log monitoring, you are flying blind. Invest in a SIM system. Configure it to alert on anomalous patterns, unusual transaction volumes, transactions at unusual hours, repeated failed access attempts. Number 4. Do your reconciliations frequently. The discrepancy in Seth's case was caught because bank statements do not lie. Make your reconciliation process a regular, frequent, rigorous exercise. It is your external verification mechanism when internal systems have been compromised. Number 5. Have an incident response plan. What does your organization do in the first hour after discovering a breach? Who gets called? What systems get isolated? Where is the playbook? If your answer is, "We would figure it out," that is not a plan. Write the plan now. Practice it. The first hour after a breach is the most critical, and panic is the most expensive response. Number 6. Security audit before something happens. Seth won a competition run by a major bank in 2019 because that bank understood the value of finding vulnerabilities before criminals did. Your organization should be doing the same, hiring ethical penetration testers to probe your systems on a regular schedule. If you cannot afford a full-time security team, engage freelance penetration testers with verifiable credentials and clear scope agreements. Pay for the audit. It is cheaper than the breach. The bigger picture for Africa's digital future, I want to close with something that I think matters beyond Kenya's borders, because the Seth Mwabe story is a preview of what every African country with growing digital infrastructure is about to face, and the countries that handle it well will have a significant advantage. Africa's fintech sector is one of the fastest growing in the world. Mobile money penetration across the continent is extraordinary. Kenya's M-Pesa led the way, but similar systems have spread across Nigeria, Ghana, Tanzania, Rwanda, South Africa, and beyond. This growth is genuinely transformative. It has given financial access to hundreds of millions of people who had none. But that growth also creates an attack surface. Every new user, every new transaction, every new integration between mobile money platforms and banks and betting firms and payment processors is a potential entry point for someone who knows what they are looking for. And Africa's cybersecurity talent pool, while growing, is not growing at the same pace as the attack surface it needs to defend. The DCI Banking Fraud Investigation Unit that caught Seth deserves genuine credit. They did the hard technical work. They followed a complex digital trail across multiple platforms, tracked an IP address to a physical location, and built a case that now faces 20 counts of charges in court. That is not easy work, and it is not well-resourced work. But for every Seth who gets caught, the question that should keep every financial institution's CISO awake at night is how many went undetected. How many operations happened in those same 6-minute windows and were never discovered because the reconciliation numbers matched closely enough, or the logs were erased cleanly enough, or the amounts were small enough that nobody looked closely? The answer to that question is uncomfortable, and the only structural response, beyond better corporate security hygiene, is a properly funded national cybersecurity architecture, Not a committee, not a framework document, an actual, staffed, funded, operationally capable infrastructure that can both defend against attacks and absorb Kenya's best technical talent into legitimate, well-paid work before the alternative becomes more attractive. What Seth Mwabe actually taught us? Let me land this. Seth Mwabe is currently facing 20 criminal charges. He has denied all of them. The court process will determine what happens next, and that process should be allowed to run its full course. I am not his lawyer, and I am not his judge. But what his story has already established, regardless of what the court ultimately decides, is a set of truths that Kenya and Africa cannot afford to ignore. The first truth: the digital systems running Africa's financial infrastructure have real, exploitable vulnerabilities. The fact that a 26-year-old in a two-bedroom apartment could allegedly execute a 38-transaction, 11.4 million shilling operation in 6 minutes and go undetected for weeks is not a statement about Seth Mwabe's genius. It is a statement about the state of system security at the organizations involved. The second truth: talent without legitimate pathway becomes a risk. Africa is producing technically brilliant young people who are self-teaching skills that governments and corporations desperately need. The pipeline from that talent to properly paid, properly structured, legitimate work is badly broken. That is not a moral failure of individuals, it is a structural failure of institutions. The third truth: cybersecurity is not an IT department problem, it is a leadership problem. Every CEO, every board member, every minister responsible for a digital-era organization needs to understand that security is not a technical afterthought, it is a strategic priority. And the organizations that treat it as such, the ones that invest in people, process, and monitoring before the breach happens, are the ones that will survive and thrive in the era that is already here. Seth Mwabe, in whatever the courts ultimately decide about his guilt or innocence, has already done Kenya one accidental service. He made the country pay attention to how vulnerable its digital systems are. The question is whether that attention becomes action. This has been Africa Daily. Share this episode with every business owner, every IT professional, and every government official you know, because the next Seth is already out there. The only question is whether your systems are ready. See you next time.